The stars were dying, not the stars themselves, but the light of civilization that had burned across the galaxy for 10,000 years. Ambassador Vorin stood on the observation deck of Station Prime and watched another world go dark on the great map. That made 712 planets lost to the Dread Swarm in the last cycle alone. Vorin was old, even by the standards of his long-lived species. His pale blue skin had grown thin with age, and his 4 eyes no longer saw as clearly as they once did. But he did not need clear vision to understand what the map showed him. The Galactic Coalition was dying, and nothing they had done could stop it. The Dread Swarm had come from beyond the Outer Rim, from the dark spaces between galaxies where no light had ever touched. They were not like other enemies. They did not want resources or territory or slaves. They wanted only to consume. Every world they touched became dead and empty, stripped of all life down to the smallest creature. The Coalition had sent their greatest fleets against the swarm. The ships had not returned. They had sent their most powerful weapons. The weapons had failed. They had tried to negotiate, to offer peace, to beg for mercy. The swarm did not answer because the swarm did not care. It simply consumed and moved on to the next world. Vorin turned away from the map and walked slowly to his office. His assistant, a young female of the Teth species with bright green scales, looked up as he entered. "Ambassador," she said, "the Council is asking for your report." "Tell them there is nothing new to report," Vorin said. He sat down heavily in his chair. "Tell them we are still dying." "There must be something we can do," the assistant said. Her voice was full of the hope that only the young could hold on to in times like these. Vorin looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to his communication screen and pulled up a file he had been studying for many cycles. It was a file about a species from a small planet in a distant corner of the galaxy. A species that had only recently discovered space travel. A species that the Coalition had been watching with great interest and some concern. Humans. They called themselves humans. The Coalition had first noticed them 200 years ago, when they sent simple radio signals into space. Since then, they had grown at a speed that shocked the older species. They had spread to their moon, then to the nearby planets, then to other star systems. They learned and adapted faster than any species the Coalition had ever seen. But that was not what made the Coalition watch them so carefully. What made them watch was the humans' history. Their own history. On their own world. Before they ever left for the stars. Vorin had read the files many times. He had seen the records of human wars, human weapons, human violence. He had seen images of their battlefields, their destroyed cities, their terrible inventions designed only to kill each other. The Coalition species had fought wars too, of course. All species did. But the humans fought differently. They fought with a darkness and creativity that made even the oldest Coalition members uncomfortable. The Council had decided to leave the humans alone. Let them grow at their own pace. Do not invite them to join the Coalition. Do not share technology with them. And most importantly, do not make them angry. That had been the policy for 200 years. But now Vorin wondered if that policy had been a mistake. He opened a communication channel to Earth. It took several minutes for the signal to reach across the vast distance. When the screen finally flickered to life, he saw a human female looking back at him. She had dark hair cut short and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. She wore a simple gray uniform with no decorations. "Ambassador Vorin," she said. Her voice was calm and flat. "This is unexpected. The Coalition has never contacted us directly before." "Commander Yuna," Vorin replied. He had learned her name from the files. She was the head of something called the Special Response Division. The files did not say exactly what that division did, but the hints in the documents had made Vorin's blood run cold. "I am contacting you because we are desperate." "Desperate," Yuna repeated. The word seemed to interest her. "Please explain." Vorin told her everything. He told her about the Dread Swarm, about the hundreds of worlds that had fallen, about the billions of lives that had been lost. He told her about the failed fleets and the useless weapons and the silence that followed every attempt to communicate. He spoke for nearly an hour, and through it all, Yuna's expression did not change. When he finished, there was a long silence. Vorin felt his heart beating fast in his chest. He had just revealed the Coalition's greatest weakness to a species they had deliberately kept at a distance. If the humans decided to use this information against them, to take advantage of their weakness, the Coalition would have no way to stop them. But Yuna did not speak of advantage or opportunity. Instead, she asked a simple question. How many soldiers do you need? Vorin blinked all four of his eyes. We have calculated that a force of at least 500,000 would be required to have any chance of slowing the swarm's advance. Yuna nodded slowly. 500,000, she said. That is a large number. We know it is much to ask. Vorin said quickly. We can offer technology in exchange. Resources. A full membership in the Coalition. With all the rights and benefits that brings, we can... Ambassador, Yuna interrupted. Her voice was still calm, but there was something in it now, something that made Vorin stop talking immediately. I need you to understand something. We do not fight like other species fight. We do not send large armies to stand in lines and fire weapons at each other until one side falls. Then how do you fight? Vorin asked. Yuna smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of something old and dangerous wearing a human face. We send hunters, she said. We send the ones who were made for darkness. You asked for soldiers, Ambassador. You will not get soldiers. You will get something better. You will get the beasts that stalk nightmares. Vorin felt a chill run through his entire body. I do not understand. You will, Yuna said. Expect our ships in 30 of your cycles. And Ambassador, tell your people not to be afraid when they arrive. The fear they feel will not be for them. It will be for your enemies. The screen went dark. Vorin sat alone in his office for a long time, staring at the blank screen. He had asked for help, and help was coming. But as he thought about the look in Commander Yuna's eyes, he wondered if he had just made the greatest mistake in the history of the Coalition. 30 cycles later, 3 small ships appeared at the edge of Coalition space. They were not warships. They were not troop carriers. They were small and dark and moved through space like shadows moving through a room. The galaxy had asked for soldiers. The humans had sent something else entirely. The 3 human ships docked at Station Prime without making a sound. The station's sensors had barely detected them approaching. One moment the space around the station was empty, and the next moment the ships were simply there, as if they had always been waiting in the darkness. Ambassador Vorin stood in the main docking bay with a welcome party of 50 Coalition soldiers. The soldiers were the best the Coalition had to offer. They were tall and strong and carried weapons that could destroy a building with a single shot. Vorin had brought them because he wanted to show the humans that the Coalition was still powerful, still worth saving. Now, as the airlock of the lead human ship began to open, Vorin was not so sure that was a good idea. The first human to step out was a male. He was not particularly tall by human standards, and his build was lean rather than muscular. He wore armor that was completely black, so black that it seemed to swallow the light around it. His face was calm and his eyes moved slowly across the docking bay, taking in every detail. Behind him came 11 more humans, 6 males and 5 females. All wearing the same black armor. That was all. 12 humans. 12. Vorin had expected hundreds. He had expected thousands. He had hoped for tens of thousands, packed into ships, ready to fight. Instead, he got 12 humans who walked off their ships as calmly as if they were arriving at a dinner party. The Coalition soldiers shifted nervously. The humans did not seem to notice or care. The lead human stopped in front of Vorin and inclined his head slightly. Ambassador, I am Admiral Tay, Commander of Nightwalker Unit 7. We are here as requested. Vorin opened his mouth and then closed it again. He had prepared a speech. He had prepared words of welcome and gratitude and hope. None of those words seemed right anymore. Admiral Tay, he finally managed to say, we are grateful for your response to our call. But I must ask, where is your army? Where are your forces? Tay looked at him with eyes that seemed to see straight through Vorin's body and into his soul. We are the Force, he said simply. 12? Voron's voice came out higher than he intended. You have brought 12 soldiers to fight an enemy that has destroyed 700 worlds? The dread swarm numbers in the billions. They have consumed entire civilizations. And you bring 12? 13, said a voice from behind Tay. A female human stepped forward. She was smaller than the others, with a face that might have been pretty if not for the scars that crossed her left cheek. You forgot to count yourself, Admiral. Tay did not smile, but something in his eyes changed slightly. My apologies. 13. Voron looked at the human female. And you are? I am Specialist Hana, she said. I kill things. She said it the same way someone might say they enjoyed gardening or collecting stamps. It was just a fact about herself. Nothing more. One of the coalition soldiers behind Voron laughed. It was not a kind laugh. 13 humans against the dread swarm, he said loudly. The humans have sent us a joke instead of an army. The other coalition soldiers began to murmur in agreement. Voron saw doubt and anger spreading across their faces. He had promised them help. Real help. And this was what he had delivered. 13 humans in black armor. It was ridiculous. It was insulting. Hana turned to look at the soldier who had laughed. She studied him for a moment, the way a scientist might study an interesting insect. You have a combat drone stationed at the far end of this bay, she said. Defensive model. Twin plasma cannons. Reinforced armor. Response time of 0.4 seconds. The soldier stopped laughing. How do you know about our drone? I counted 3 more in the ceiling. Hana continued as if he had not spoken. And 2 in the floor. Your security is adequate for normal threats. She paused. Would you like to see what we do to adequate security? Before anyone could answer, Hana moved. One moment she was standing still, and the next moment she was across the bay. A blur of black motion that Voron's eyes could not follow. There was a sound of tearing metal, a flash of sparks, and then Hana was walking back toward the group holding something in her hand. It was the drone's primary processor. The drone itself lay in pieces on the floor, smoke rising from its destroyed body. The entire event had taken less than 3 seconds. The docking bay was completely silent. The coalition soldiers stared at the destroyed drone with wide eyes. Their weapons hung forgotten at their sides. Voron realized that his mouth was hanging open and closed it quickly. Hana held up the processor. 0.4 second response time, she said. Too slow. She dropped the processor on the floor where it shattered into a dozen pieces. Admiral Tay stepped forward. Ambassador Voron, he said, his voice still perfectly calm. I understand your concerns. You expected numbers. You expected the kind of warfare that your coalition has practiced for thousands of years. Large armies, big weapons, battles fought across open spaces. Yes, Voron managed to say, that is how wars are fought. That is how your wars are fought, Tay said. Human wars are different. We learned long ago that 1,000 soldiers standing in the light are worth less than 1 hunter moving through the darkness. We do not fight our enemies. We hunt them. We find them where they sleep. We follow them where they run. We become the nightmare that makes them afraid to close their eyes. The dread swarm does not feel fear. Voron said. They do not think like we do. They only consume. Everything feels fear, said another human, a large male with a shaved head and hands that looked like they could crush stone. They just don't know it yet. I am Sergeant Wu. I specialize in making things afraid. Voron looked at the humans one by one. They stood perfectly still, perfectly calm, and yet there was something about them that made the air feel heavier. The coalition soldiers had begun to back away without seeming to realize they were doing it. What are you? Voron asked. What has Earth sent us? Admiral Tay considered the question. We are Nightwalkers, he said. We are what humanity creates when something threatens the people we care about. We are trained from childhood to become weapons. Not soldiers who follow orders and march in lines. Weapons. Living, thinking, hunting weapons. How is that possible? Voron asked. How can you train children to become this? Humans are adaptable, Tay said. It is our greatest strength and our greatest darkness. Give us a reason, and we will become anything. The Nightwalker program takes children who show certain abilities and shapes them into something new, something that exists between human and something else. Hana spoke again. We do not need sleep for days at a time. We can see in complete darkness. We feel no pain until we choose to feel it. And we have spent our entire lives learning every way that a living thing can die. Vorin felt his heart's beating too fast. He had asked for help, and help had come. But this help was terrifying in ways he had not expected. The Dread Swarm has never faced anything like you, he said slowly. No, Admiral Tay agreed. They have not. And when we are finished with them, they will wish they had never come to this galaxy. He looked toward the windows where distant stars burned in the darkness. Show us to our quarters, Ambassador. We need to study our enemy, and then we need to begin the hunt. Vorin nodded and turned to lead the way. As he walked, he heard the soft footsteps of the Nightwalkers behind him. 13 humans. 13 weapons wrapped in human skin. The galaxy had asked for soldiers. The humans had sent monsters instead. And for the first time in many cycles, Vorin felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt hope. The Coalition Council Chamber was the largest room on Station Prime. It could hold representatives from 500 different species, and today, it was completely full. Every council member had come to see the humans who claimed they could fight the Dread Swarm. Most of them had come to laugh. Ambassador Vorin stood at the center of the chamber, with Admiral Tay beside him. The other 12 Nightwalkers were spread around the edges of the room, standing so still that many of the council members did not even notice them. That, Vorin thought, was probably exactly what the humans wanted. High Counselor Meth, a massive creature covered in thick gray fur, spoke first. His voice boomed across the chamber like thunder. Ambassador Vorin, you have wasted the Coalition's time and resources. You contacted a primitive species against the explicit wishes of this council, and they have sent us 13 soldiers. 13. This is an insult. Many voices rose in agreement. The chamber filled with angry sounds from dozens of different species. Vorin felt his confidence beginning to slip away. Admiral Tay raised one hand. He did not shout or demand attention. He simply raised his hand and waited. Slowly, impossibly, the chamber grew quiet. The council members found themselves looking at the human, drawn to him by something they could not name. High Counselor, Tay said. His voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the room. You call us primitive. I understand why. Compared to your species, humans are young. We have only been traveling between stars for a few hundred years. Your coalition has existed for 10,000. Then you admit your weakness, Meth said with satisfaction. I admit nothing, Tay replied. I state a fact. But I would like to share another fact with you. In our short history, humans have fought more wars than your coalition has fought in its entire existence. We have invented more ways to kill each other than your scientists could imagine. We have turned murder into an art form and survival into a religion. The chamber was completely silent now. The council members stared at the human with expressions that mixed confusion with growing unease. Your coalition has spent 10,000 years trying to avoid conflict, Tay continued. You have built beautiful cities and created wonderful technologies. You have learned to live in peace with each other. These are good things, but they have made you soft. They have made you forget what it means to be a predator. We have armies, another council member said. We have weapons. You have toys. Tay interrupted. I mean no disrespect, but your armies are not designed to fight an enemy like the Dread Swarm. Your armies are designed to stand in neat lines and shoot at other armies standing in neat lines. The Swarm does not fight that way. The Swarm overwhelms. The Swarm surrounds. The Swarm attacks from every direction at once and never stops until everything is dead. Then how can 13 humans possibly make a difference? Meth demanded. Tay looked at Specialist Hana and nodded slightly. Hana stepped forward into the center of the chamber. She was still wearing her black armor, but now she also carried a small device in her hand. "With the Council's permission," she said, "I would like to show you something from Earth's history." Meth waved one of his massive paws. "Show us whatever you wish. It will not change anything." Hana activated the device. A holographic image appeared in the air above her head. It showed a vast plain covered in snow. Thousands of soldiers in gray uniforms marched across the frozen ground, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. "This is from a war that happened on Earth many centuries ago," Hana explained. "One nation invaded another. They sent more than 3 million soldiers. The largest army ever assembled up to that point." The council members watched with mild interest. 3 million soldiers was impressive, they supposed, for a primitive species. The image changed. Now it showed the same army, but something was wrong. The soldiers were not marching anymore. They were running. They were falling. They were dying in the snow, shot by enemies they could not see. "The defenders did not meet this army on the battlefield," Hana said. "They did not stand in lines and fire weapons. Instead, they burned their own cities so the invaders would have no shelter. They destroyed their own food supplies so the invaders would have nothing to eat. And then they sent small groups of hunters into the night." The image changed again. Dark figures moved through shadows, striking without warning and disappearing before anyone could respond. Soldiers screamed and fell, killed by enemies they never saw. Officers were murdered in their beds. Supply wagons exploded without explanation. The hunters killed tens of thousands of enemy soldiers without ever fighting a single battle, Hana continued. They turned the night into a weapon. They turned fear into a poison. And when the winter came, the great army was destroyed, not by another army, but by cold, hunger, and terror. She deactivated the device. The holographic images faded away. "The dread swarm is larger than any army in human history," Hana said. "But they have a weakness. They have never faced an enemy that fights like we do. They have never faced an enemy that hunts them." "This were Forecount." Another Nightwalker stepped forward. He was young, perhaps the youngest of the group, with a face that seemed too gentle for a warrior. "My name is Jin," he said. "I study enemies. I learn how they think, how they move, how they communicate. I have been studying the dread swarm since we received the ambassador's message." "And what have you learned?" Meth asked. His voice was less certain now. "The swarm is not mindless," Jin said. "They have a structure, a hierarchy. The small creatures that overwhelm your planets are not the true threat. They are controlled by larger creatures, which are controlled by even larger creatures, going all the way up to what we believe is a central intelligence." "We know this," a council member said. "We have studied them too. But have you acted on that knowledge?" Jin asked. "Have you tried to cut off the head of the snake instead of fighting its body?" Silence answered him. Admiral Tay stepped forward again. "Your coalition has been fighting the wrong war. You have been trying to stop an ocean with your hands. We will not try to stop the ocean. We will find the source of the water and poison it." "How?" Voran asked. He had not meant to speak, but the question escaped before he could stop it. "We hunt," Tay said simply. "We move through their territory like shadows. We find their command creatures and we kill them. We disrupt their communication, their coordination, their control, and when the smaller creatures are left without direction, they become confused, vulnerable. Your coalition forces can handle confused and vulnerable." High Counselor Meth was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its anger. "You are asking us to trust 13 humans with the fate of the coalition." "Yes," Tay said. "That is exactly what we are asking. And if you fail?" "We will not fail," Tay said. There was no boast in his voice, no pride. He spoke as if he was stating a simple truth, like saying the stars were bright or space was cold. "Failure is not something we are trained to accept. We will succeed, or we will die trying. There is no other option for a Nightwalker." Meth looked at the other council members. Something had changed in the chamber. The mockery and doubt that had filled the air before was gone. In its place was something new, not quite belief, not quite hope, but something close to both. "Very well," Meth said finally. "The council will give you one chance. One opportunity to prove that your methods can work. If you succeed, we will provide whatever support you need. If you fail—" "If we fail," Tay said, "then your coalition has lost nothing but 13 humans." "But we will not fail, High Counselor. The Dread Swarm has conquered 700 worlds because no one has ever fought them properly. That changes now." He turned and walked toward the chamber's exit. The other Nightwalkers fell into step behind him, emerging from the shadows as if they had materialized from thin air. Council members jumped in surprise, realizing for the first time how close the humans had been standing to them. At the door, Tay paused and looked back. "Tell your people not to be afraid when the darkness starts moving," he said. "The darkness will be us, and we are on your side." Then he was gone, and the council was left in silence, wondering what they had just agreed to let loose upon the galaxy. The planet was called Threshold. It was a world of endless forests and deep valleys, home to 3 million coalition citizens before the Dread Swarm arrived. Now it was a world of death. The swarm had landed 4 days ago, and already half the planet was covered in their dark, spreading corruption. Coalition Command had given up on Threshold. The evacuation ships had taken who they could, but millions remained trapped on the surface. The military advisors said there was nothing to be done. The swarm would consume the planet within a week, and then they would move on to the next world, just as they always did. The Nightwalkers had other plans. Sergeant Wu was the first to touch the ground. He dropped from the small shuttle without a sound, his black armor blending perfectly with the shadows of the night forest. Behind him came 3 others: Jin, who studied the enemy, Hannah, who killed without hesitation, and a quiet female named Sue, who specialized in explosives and destruction. The rest of the team had landed on the other side of the planet. Admiral Tay had divided them into groups of 3 and 4, each with a specific target, each moving toward a specific goal. The hunt had begun. Wu crouched in the darkness and opened his senses to the world around him. He could hear the rustle of leaves in the wind, the distant screams of creatures being consumed, the wet, horrible sounds of the swarm feeding. He could smell death in the air, thick and heavy. And he could feel something else. A presence. A pulse of intelligence coming from somewhere deep in the forest. "I have the first target," he whispered into his communication device. "Commander creature. Approximately 2 kilometers northeast. Moving." He did not wait for a response. Nightwalkers did not need permission to hunt. Wu moved through the forest like a ghost. His feet made no sound on the ground. His body passed through the undergrowth without disturbing a single leaf. He had been trained to move this way since he was 6 years old, and now it was as natural to him as breathing. The swarm creatures were everywhere. They moved through the darkness in groups of 10 or 20, their bodies twisted and wrong, their many legs carrying them with horrible speed. They were searching for survivors, for anything living that they could consume. Wu passed within meters of several groups, and not one of them noticed him. He found the commander creature in a clearing near a small river. It was larger than the others, 3 times the size of a normal swarm creature, with a head that pulsed with strange light. It stood at the center of a group of 50 smaller creatures, and they moved around it like planets orbiting a sun, responding to commands that no coalition scanner had ever been able to detect. Wu studied the creature for exactly 30 seconds. He noted its size, its shape, the way it moved, the way its head pulsed with that strange light. Then he attacked. The commander creature was dead before it knew it was in danger. Wu's blade passed through its head in a single clean motion, destroying whatever intelligence had been housed there. The creature collapsed, and for a moment, everything was still. Then the smaller creatures went insane. Without their commander to guide them, they began to move in random directions, crashing into each other, attacking the trees and the ground and sometimes each other. Wu watched them for a moment, then spoke into his communication device. First target eliminated. Lesser creatures are disoriented. Jin, you were right about the command structure. I usually am. Jin's voice came back. Hana has reached her target. Su is setting charges at the primary landing site. We are on schedule. On the other side of the planet, Admiral Tay moved through a ruined city with 2 of his team members. The buildings here had been beautiful once. Curved and elegant structures made of something that looked like crystal. Now they were broken and empty, their surfaces covered in the dark substance that the swarm left behind wherever it went. Tay was hunting a different kind of target. The swarm had a hierarchy, and at the top of that hierarchy on each conquered world was a creature they had begun to call a brain. It was not a fighting creature. It did not consume or destroy. It simply thought. It processed information. It coordinated the entire planetary operation through signals that traveled faster than light. Kill the brain, and the entire swarm presence on Threshold would fall into chaos. Finding the brain was not easy. It hid deep underground, protected by layers of commander creatures and thousands of soldiers. No coalition force had ever gotten close to one. No coalition soldier had even seen one. Tay was not a coalition soldier. He moved through the tunnels beneath the city, descending deeper and deeper into the earth. The swarm creatures became thicker here, their bodies pressed together in the narrow passages. Tay killed them one at a time, silently, cleanly, leaving no evidence of his passage except for the bodies that collapsed behind him. His 2 companions spread out to flank him, each taking a different tunnel, each heading toward the same target from a different direction. They did not need to communicate. They had trained together for so long that they could predict each other's movements with perfect accuracy. After an hour of descent, Tay found what he was looking for. The brain was massive. It filled an entire chamber, a pulsing mass of flesh and light that seemed to be alive in ways that normal creatures were not. Tubes extended from its body into the walls, connecting it to the planet itself, drawing information from every swarm creature on Threshold's surface. Around it stood 12 commander creatures, the largest Tay had ever seen. They were its guardians, its protectors. They existed only to keep the brain safe. Tay looked at the brain and the guardians and calculated his options. 12 commanders, each one capable of killing a normal soldier in seconds. Together, they would be unstoppable for almost any enemy. Tay was not almost any enemy. He attacked with a speed that made his earlier movements look slow. His blade sang through the air, finding gaps in armor, severing limbs, destroying the strange organs that let the commanders control their lesser creatures. The commanders tried to respond, tried to fight back, but they were designed to lead armies, not to fight a single enemy who moved like darkness itself. In 43 seconds, all 12 commanders were dead. Tay stood before the brain, breathing hard for the first time. The massive creature pulsed and shimmered, and Tay had the strange sense that it was watching him, studying him, trying to understand what he was. "You have never seen anything like me," Tay said softly. "Your swarm has conquered 1,000 worlds, and you have never faced a predator that hunts you." The brain pulsed faster, its light flickering. Somewhere far above, Tay knew that swarm creatures all across the planet were beginning to slow down, to hesitate, to feel something they had never felt before: fear. "This is what humans do," Tay said. He raised his blade. "We become the thing that nightmares are afraid of." The brain died with a sound like 1,000 voices screaming at once. The light faded from its body, and all across Threshold, the dread swarm stopped moving. On the surface, Wu watched as the creatures around him froze. Their bodies shook, their many legs twitching without purpose. Some of them simply collapsed, unable to function without the guiding intelligence that had controlled them. "The brain is dead." Tay's voice came through the communication device. "All teams, begin elimination of remaining forces. The coalition can send their armies now. The hard work is done." Wu smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Around him, the frozen swarm creatures began to recover. But slowly, uncertainly. They were prey now, not predators. And Wu was very good at hunting prey. The night had only begun, and there was still much work to do. The war against the Dread Swarm lasted 97 days. By coalition standards, this was impossibly short. Wars against enemies of this scale normally lasted decades, sometimes centuries. The coalition had expected to fight for generations, to lose thousands of worlds, to see billions more die before anything resembling victory could be achieved. Instead, the war ended in 97 days. The Nightwalkers had moved through the swarm-controlled territories like a disease that could not be stopped. They struck at world after world, hunting the brains, killing the commanders, spreading chaos through the enemy's ranks. Behind them came the coalition forces, finally able to fight an enemy that had been crippled by fear and confusion. 43 worlds were reclaimed. The swarm was pushed back beyond the outer rim, retreating to whatever darkness had spawned it. For the first time in recorded history, an enemy that had seemed invincible was defeated, and it had been done by 13 humans. Ambassador Vorin stood on the observation deck of Station Prime once again. But now the map showed a different story. The dark areas that had once marked swarm territory were shrinking, replaced by the bright lights of coalition civilization. Worlds that had been written off as lost were coming back to life. The chamber door opened behind him, and Admiral Tay entered. He was still wearing his black armor, though it now showed signs of the war that had been fought. Scratches marked its surface, and one of the shoulder plates had been replaced with something that did not quite match the rest. "Admiral," Vorin said, "I heard your ships are preparing to leave." "Yes," Tay replied. He came to stand beside Vorin and looked at the map. "Our work here is finished. Earth has other needs for us." "Other threats?" Tay smiled slightly. "There are always other threats. Humans are good at making enemies, Ambassador. It is one of our many talents." Vorin was quiet for a moment. He had spent the last 97 days watching the Nightwalkers work, studying their methods, trying to understand what they were. He still did not fully understand. Perhaps he never would. "I have a question," he said finally. "One I have been afraid to ask." "Ask," Tay said. "The Nightwalker program. You said it takes children and turns them into what you are. Weapons. Hunters. Things that stalk nightmares." Vorin hesitated. "How can you justify that? How can your species do that to its own young?" Tay did not answer immediately. He continued to look at the map, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than Vorin had ever heard it. "Do you know what I remember from my childhood, Ambassador, before the program took me?" "No," Vorin said. "Nothing," Tay said. "I remember nothing. I was 3 years old when they came for me. My parents had died in a conflict on one of our colony worlds. I had no family, no one to protect me, no one to care what happened to me. The program gave me a purpose. It gave me a family. The other Nightwalkers are my brothers and sisters. But the training, the things they made you become, were painful," Tay admitted. "Were difficult beyond anything you can imagine. But they were also necessary. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Ambassador. Your coalition has learned that now. Sometimes, to protect the innocent, you need people who are willing to become something other than innocent." Vorin considered this. "And, do you regret it? If you could go back, would you choose differently?" Tay finally turned to look at him. His eyes, which had always seemed cold and distant, now held something that might have been warmth. "I have saved millions of lives in my career, Ambassador. Billions, perhaps, when you count the worlds we have protected. If I had lived as a normal human, I might have had a happy life, a family of my own, a peaceful death surrounded by loved ones. But instead, I have this," Tay said, gesturing at the map. "Instead, I have the knowledge that because I exist, others can have those happy lives. Others can have families and peaceful deaths. I gave up my humanity so that others could keep theirs. I do not regret that choice, not for a single moment." The door opened again, and the other Nightwalkers entered the observation deck. They moved in their usual silence, their black armor making them look like shadows given human form. Hana came to stand beside Tay. Jin and Wu took positions near the window. The others spread out around the room, always watching, always alert, even here in the safest place in Coalition space. "The ships are ready," Hana said. "Command has received word of a situation in the outer territories. They want us there within 40 cycles." Tay nodded. "Then, we should not delay." He turned back to Vorin and inclined his head slightly. "Ambassador, it has been an honor working with your coalition. I hope we will not need to return." "Because another threat like the swarm would be too terrible to imagine?" Vorin asked. "No," Tay said. "Because the next time we come, it will mean that your coalition could not handle the problem on its own. And that would mean we did not teach you well enough." He began to walk toward the door, the other Nightwalkers falling into step behind him. At the door, he paused and looked back. "The dread swarm will not return for a very long time," he said. "We made sure of that. We did not just defeat them, Ambassador. We terrified them. We showed them that there are predators in this galaxy that even they should fear. That fear will keep them away for centuries. And if they do come back, then call us again," Tay said. "We will answer. That is what Nightwalkers do. We answer when others cannot. We go where others fear to go. We become the nightmare so that others can have peaceful dreams." He was gone before Vorin could respond, moving into the corridor with that impossible silence that all the Nightwalkers possessed. The others followed, one by one, until only Vorin remained on the observation deck. He stood there for a long time, looking at the map, thinking about everything that had happened. The coalition had been dying. Now it lived. 700 worlds had been consumed. Now 43 had been reclaimed, and more would follow as the swarm's influence continued to fade. All because of 13 humans. The coalition would never forget what had happened. Stories would be told for generations about the war against the dread swarm, about the dark-armored hunters who had appeared from nowhere and done the impossible. Children would grow up hearing tales of the Nightwalkers, of the beasts in human form who had saved the galaxy. But Vorin suspected that the most important lesson was not about the Nightwalkers themselves. It was about the species that had created them. Humans. Strange, violent, brilliant humans. A species so young that they had barely begun to explore the stars. A species that the coalition had ignored, had feared, had deliberately kept at a distance. A species that, when asked for help, had sent their finest hunters to save strangers they had never met. Vorin remembered Tay's words from their first meeting. "We become the nightmare so that others can have peaceful dreams." It was a terrible philosophy in some ways. It required sacrifice, pain, the willing transformation of human beings into something other than human. But it was also beautiful. In its own dark way. The Nightwalkers had given up everything so that others could have everything. They had become monsters so that monsters could be fought. Vorin turned away from the map and walked slowly back to his office. On the way, he passed by his assistant, the young female with the green scales who had been with him since the beginning. "Ambassador," she said, "the Council is asking for your report on the Nightwalker program. They want to know if we should try to create something similar." Vorin stopped. He thought about Tay's eyes, about the emptiness and the purpose that lived there together. He thought about Hana's scars and Wu's terrible smile and Jin's gentle face hiding depths of violence that no normal being should possess. "Tell the Council," he said slowly, "that some things should not be copied. Some tools should not be forged by anyone except those who truly understand the cost." "What do you mean, Ambassador?" Vorin looked at his assistant and tried to find the words. "The Nightwalkers are not just weapons," he said finally. "They are a warning. A reminder of what intelligent species are capable of when they are pushed to their limits. Humanity created them because humanity lives in a galaxy full of dangers, and they decided that some of their own would bear the weight of that danger so that others could live in peace. Is that not noble?" "It is the most noble and the most terrible thing I have ever seen," Vorin said. "And I hope the Coalition never becomes desperate enough to create such a thing. Because if we do, it will mean we have lost something we can never get back." He continued to his office, leaving his assistant with more questions than answers. But as he walked, Voron found himself smiling despite everything. The galaxy had asked for soldiers. Humans had sent the beasts that stalk nightmares, and the galaxy would never forget it.